Piece the story together with Roz Atkins. Outside Source, tonight at 7 on the BBC News Channel.
At 6, the first flight taking asylum seekers to Rwanda is due to leave the UK in the next few hours. This is the plane expected to fly them out of a military base in Wiltshire, but only a handful may be on board.
We think it's a sensible partnership we've set up with Rwanda. Yes, it may take a while to get working properly, but it doesn't mean we're not going to keep going.
Today, more than 300 people arrived in Dover after they managed to cross the channel illegally in small boats. Will the flights to Rwanda deter people from attempting the dangerous crossing? Also on the programme. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon kicks off a new campaign for another vote on Scottish independence. A memorial service at Westminster Abbey for the 72 people who died in the Grenfell Tower disaster 5 years ago today. The Yorkshire seaside town of Whitby votes to restrict the number of second homes for holidaymakers.
And he hits it hard. He hits it to the cover point boundary.
And a thrilling win for England as they beat New Zealand by 5 wickets to take the Test series.
Coming up in Sports Day later in the hour on BBC News, we'll have the latest from the Nations League. 3 home nations playing, including Scotland, who are facing Armenia in Yerevan.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6 from our new studio at Broadcasting House. A flight to Rwanda carrying just a handful of asylum seekers is due to leave the UK tonight after campaigners and charities failed in their bid to block it. It was meant to be taking more than 100 people, but legal challenges mean there will be no more than 7 on board, among them Iraqi Kurds and Iranians. The government insists the flights are necessary to deter people trafficking gangs helping thousands cross the channel, but Church of England leaders have called it immoral. Here's our home editor, Mark Easton. Well, the numbers crossing the channel have more than trebled in the past 2 years. Close to 29,000 asylum seekers reached these shores by boat last year alone. And just over 15,000 people were offered asylum here last year. Almost 4 times that number applied, though. In a moment, we'll talk to our political editor, Chris Mason, who's at Westminster. But first, our senior Africa correspondent, Anne Soy, is in the Rwandan capital, Kigali. And the authorities have been talking about all this today. What have they been saying? Chris, thank you. Scotland's First Minister has launched a fresh push for Scottish independence, insisting there is a strong and compelling case for Scotland to leave the UK. Nicola Sturgeon said she believed the Scottish Parliament had a mandate for a referendum and urged Westminster to respect democracy. Downing Street says now is not the time for another poll, and people across Scotland want to see both governments working together. Our Scotland editor, James Cook, reports. James Cook, thank you. The time is 6:15, our top story this evening. The first flight taking asylum seekers to Rwanda is due to leave the UK in the next few hours. And coming up, as much of Europe swelters, weather warnings for England and Wales with temperatures set to soar this week.
Coming up in Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News Channel. She was injured at last year's Wimbledon and has had 12 months out. But Serena Williams will make her singles return at this year's Championships.
Now, this is the Yorkshire seaside town of Whitby. With its beautiful coastline and beaches, it's a really popular place for holidays. So popular, in fact, that about 1 in 5 properties here is now second home or a holiday let. Local residents have had enough. They've voted to stop new homes being snapped up for holidaymakers. The vote's not legally binding, but residents hope it will make a difference, as Danny Savage has been finding out. There are 1.3 million job vacancies in the UK now, a new record high. The rise is mainly down to older workers who've chosen to retire early during the pandemic. The Chancellor said the UK's jobs market remains robust, but Labour has accused the government of utter complacency about the high number of people choosing not to work. Today's new figures also show how pay rises are falling behind soaring inflation. Well, our economics editor Faisal Islam is here to talk us through the figures.
Yeah, well, Sophie, it's a bit of a mixed picture. The good news is that unemployment is close to historic lows, reflecting the success of pandemic support measures at 3.8%, one of the lowest levels in half a century. But the smallest signs that it's starting to tick back up again in the very latest data. However, take a look at this. Vacancies in the economy hit another record, this time above 1.3 million, more than the population of Birmingham, with hundreds of thousands of missing workers, reflecting those retiring during the pandemic, long-term ill, and fewer European workers post-Brexit under new immigration rules. Though this is the consequence of a rebound from the pandemic, the impact of all that is becoming material, contributing to visible problems at our airports, in NHS hospital waiting rooms, and in our cleaning companies too.
The airline industry and the government must both shoulder the responsibility for the recent chaos seen at airports. That's what MPs have been told today. The head of the consumer group Which told a Commons committee that staff shortages had been underestimated, leading to thousands of flight cancellations and long queues at airports. Our transport correspondent Katie Austin can explain more. Katie.
Yes, Sophie, while most people have got away without major problems, you'll probably have seen pictures of long queues at some airports since before Easter and heard about flight cancellations. So far in June, more than 900 flights leaving the UK have been cancelled, most of them in advance, and EasyJet has had the highest number. There have been various reasons for disruption, and problems are happening elsewhere in Europe too, but aviation staff shortages are a big underlying factor. The industry shed many jobs during the pandemic, including 30,000 at airlines. Some firms have now struggled to hire enough new recruits in time for the rising demand. It's not all about cabin crew. Ground workers like baggage handlers are in short supply, and that was given as a reason for the tour operator TUI cancelling dozens of flights from Manchester this month. Here's what they said today.
We needed to be confident we could operate, and that the baggage system in particular at Manchester was one of the primary causes for the delay, because the bags couldn't be loaded before the crew went out of hours because there was such a delay in loading the bags. We learnt our lesson. We're building more resilience in terms of things that we can influence.
Experts say hiring challenges are down to people having left the sector for other jobs, fewer European workers around post-Brexit, and it's an extremely competitive labour market. And once you've signed someone up, you have to get them security clearance. A representative of British Airways, which has cut 10% from its schedule until October, said today 3,000 new hires were still in the referencing process, and it was taking up to 140 days to get people through. Swissport, which does baggage handling for TUI and others, said it was not far off its recruitment target now, but it was taking 60 to 90 days to get people an airside pass. The airport's trade body has said some people quit while waiting to start the job.
The system is speeding up a little bit, but there certainly were delays, and it took much longer when recruitment really kicked in. So we do, as airports, there are still, I would say, several hundreds of people who are still awaiting that final clearance.
Today, MPs asked aviation firms if issues would be fixed and everything would run to plan this summer. None of them could give a guarantee. But the aviation regulator and the Department for Transport jointly wrote to airlines today, asking them to check their summer schedules were deliverable and to ensure consumers are dealt with properly when disruption does happen. Sophie.
Katie, thank you. A service has been held at Westminster Abbey to remember the 72 men, women and children who died in the Grenfell Tower fire 5 years ago today. Church leaders described the loss and anguish suffered as still vivid and sharp. Other events to mark the anniversary have included a 72-second silence and a multi-faith service at the foot of Grenfell Tower itself. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports. And you can see a special programme called Grenfell Has Anything Changed? It's available now on the BBC iPlayer and at bbc.co.uk/iPlayer or via the iPlayer app on your smart device. It's not often that England cricket captain Ben Stokes is outshone, but today, on the final day of the second test against New Zealand, Johnny Bairstow did just that, hitting a sparkling century to seal an unlikely victory at Trent Bridge. Andy Swiss has been watching all the action. Certainly is, Andy, thank you. Time for a look at the weather now. Matt Taylor is here, and it is going to get hot this week, isn't it, for a lot of people?
But not for everyone. It's a bit of an uneven weather story this week, Sophie. Yes, today we've had skies like this one, captured by one of our weather watchers in Powys, across much of England and Wales. In the sunshine, we'll see temperatures for some eastern areas at around 30 to 33 degrees. A very hot day indeed.
Wow. Matt, thank you very much. I'm going to head over here now because that is it from the BBC News at 6 on Tuesday, the 14th of June. You can, of course, keep up to date with all the latest developments on the BBC website. From the 6 team, it is goodbye, but the news continues right here on BBC One because it's now time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.
Hello there, I'm Ollie Foster. Here's what's coming up for you on Sports Day this evening.